Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. Today I have the privilege of speaking with Sharon Lebell. Sharon is a best-selling author, speaker, composer, and performing musician. She wrote The Art of Living, the classical manual on virtue, happiness, and effectiveness, which is a book that I highly recommend. In this episode, Sharon and I discuss the adventures of our lives, how to deal with the pleasant times and unpleasant times, the difference between action, thought, and intention, how to be empathetic, and much more. We center the conversation around Sam's speech from The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. If you are unfamiliar with that scene, I highly recommend giving it a quick YouTube search or Google before this, but if not, you will get the honor of hearing me read it. And no, I'm sorry, I do not use a Hobbit accent. Sharon is one of the kindest and most compassionate individuals I've ever met, and I don't say that lightly. I'm sure you will enjoy this conversation and laugh with me and Sharon just as much as I did. So without further ado, please welcome Sharon Lebell. So Sharon, I'm super excited to talk with you again. I thoroughly enjoyed our last conversation, and not only did I enjoy it, but I had the benefit of having to go back and edit it several times and learn something new every time I went through the last time we spoke on this podcast. So welcome, and I'm excited to chat with you again.
Thank you. You always ask the best questions.
I try. That's the goal. I'm thinking, as we spoke just before, I'd like to start with this speech from Tolkien's work, and just to set the scene a little bit. This was in a part of the story where Frodo and Sam, the protagonists, two of the protagonists, kind of like in the middle of this war. And they weren't in the war, they weren't fighting the war, but they're kind of just surrounded by this chaos. And Frodo kind of just has this moment where he's like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do this anymore. I can't carry this burden anymore. And Sam has this speech, which I'll read and then I'll get you to react to it, because I think it's just absolutely beautiful. I know it's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here. But we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something. That there's some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for. So how do we find peace? How do we find agency amidst the chaos that is inherent in our life?
Right. Well, there is so much in that small passage. And one of the things that stands out to me and speaks to your question is we are being asked to remember that everybody struggles. Everybody, regardless of what is going on around us. Even the people who look super shiny and ready for anything. And I think when we realize that everyone struggles, everyone is struggling in a very deep way, it makes us relax a little bit and rejoin the human race and lower our expectations a bit, because we're always trying to have life be other than what it is.
Right.
in this current moment. And that is sort of, uh, in a nutshell, the source of all of our unhappiness. But when we realize that, hello, welcome to the human condition. You've been brought here. Maybe you don't know why. You probably don't. But you get this wonderful invitation to respond to your moments however you choose to.
Yeah, and that's agency. That's the little sliver of the pie that's within your control, which kind of paradoxically, when you first realize how little is up to you, you think, like, what a small amount, like Epictetus lists like 4 things or something, right? But then as you
Yes,
get into it, you realize, no, 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 there's more than enough with that little sliver that's up to me than I can ever fully manage in my entire life. And so I think there's an encouragement there where, yeah, we have agency and it might seem small. And in some sense it is small, but it's also more than we're capable of working throughout our entire lives.
that's so true, Brandon. And I think we underestimate the efficacy of the aggregate of small, teensy-weensy actions in a particular intentional direction.
I think so too. And practically that's, the things we do on a daily basis. I was talking with our mutual friend Josh Bertolotti from In Search of Wisdom, and we were talking about this Frodo story. And one of the things we were speaking about was how, you look at Frodo and you can have respect for what he did and his courage and strength. But would I want to walk barefoot on sharp rocks for like years on end? Probably not.
I'd choose a different hobby.
I'd get some, at least, they have those new shoes now, the barefoot shoes. At least gives you a little bit of so, but yeah, and I think that's something we take we don't realize. I think to one of your points that you made there was that, this adventure, this journey that we're on, like, it's in our choices, it's in our daily choices, and that's not always pretty and it's not always comfortable, and we get lost in the moment sometimes. And so, like, maybe that's something we can touch on a little bit. Like, what do you think about being present in the moment? It's an idea that I think is very stoic, but is often, you think of more of a Buddhist sense when people think of being
Right,
present, but in my opinion, it's all throughout Stoic philosophy as well.
indeed. I think the funny thing about being present is we know nothing about it unless we are.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because, people talk, there's so much talk these days, the nomenclature of mindfulness has kind of entered just common discourse. And, be present. Oh, I just want to be really here right now. And, uh, all well and good. It's a good aspiration. But the funny thing is, I think, and I'm speaking only from my personal perspective, is that to be present, there's no try, there's no exertion. It's just letting go of the rope, letting go of whatever story you've been so committed to in that moment, and just letting life, in a sense, speak to you on its own terms and in its own language.
the story. So Frodo, the story of the Lord of the Rings. There's that moment right before that
Right.
speech where he says, "I can't do this. I can't do this anymore." And it's in
Right.
hindsight that we realize, yeah, with Sam's help, you absolutely could do this, and you did do this, and yes, it cost you your life in a sense. But in terms of the story we tell ourselves, like, what do you think we tell ourselves, and what we should be telling ourselves around just our agency and our ability? Maybe we can use the word strength to bear the load that nature has given us right now.
I I think we well, I hope I'm speaking directly to what you just said, but I think we can step back from the story and into our agency by settling our minds, in whatever way that a person knows how to do that. I never like to be prescriptive about that because I know people can do that in a lot of different ways. But a chaotic, fragmented mind cannot even see the difference between what is choice worthy and what isn't. All it does is kind of spin stories that scare us.
Yeah, and I think,
Even just that statement, I can't do this. Well, what if you had the opportunity to change what this is? What's this? I can't do this. Well, maybe you could do that.
mm-hmm.
And that's not just wordplay. They're really, our minds can be such prisons, and they can be such expansive meadows.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as well. And so in that, to get back, so that scene, he's got all this chaos going on around him. And I think
Yes.
that's an extreme example, but one that's not uncommon to the human experience. I mean, we are worldwide, there are wars going on right now. And we find ourselves,
Yes.
people do, in these situations. And so how do we settle, how do we become settled in our minds when there's so much chaos going on around? And we can get real practical with this, with the recent worldly events that everyone knows that's going on
Oh,
now.
sure. Oh, sure. Well, you have to know what you stand for. Otherwise, you will always be yanked around by circumstance, by other people who are more smooth talking than yourself, by just the forces of politics around you. You have to know what you stand for. And I actually have something of a personal example about that. It's not personal to me, but I am very close friends with a young man right now who was unjustly incarcerated for a murder he did not commit. He happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he happened to have an inauspicious skin color, and he is now in jail. But this is a man who knows who he is and what he stands for. And he believes, to put it in casually stoic language, he believes that the pursuit of virtue is his life's calling. He doesn't organize his world within a stoic, capital S framework, but because of the influences in his life and just his kind of intrinsically strong character. He has the ability to stay rooted in who he is. So he's in this jail now, and I routinely visit him. And I had a video visit with him yesterday, and we were just having a lovely talk. And suddenly behind him, there was this big ruckus. I guess, basically chaos happened behind him. A bunch of men got into some petty fight, but it started to escalate. And here we were discussing, of all things, the book, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, right? So we're just having this wonderful conversation, and everybody's going crazy around him. And so he said, "Excuse me, Sharon." And he just pivoted and started screaming at these guys in Spanish to basically cut it out. This isn't the place. This isn't the time. And then he returned to Man's Search for Meaning, and they cut it out, and they went back to, and I'm just thinking that it really would have been so easy for him to have allowed the force of that chaos to undermine his own purposes in that moment, and even allowed just the very regular occurrence of that kind of chaos happening in the environment he's in to slowly erode his values, the way he wants to face the world. And these days, I consider him my greatest teacher because I'm living this nice, cushy California life, and he's having to deal with rage and mental illness and aggression every day. But every time I see him or speak with him, he's lit from within. He has this radiance. And anyway, enough said.
Wow, that's a crazy story. What a sounds like there's going to be a movie about it in 5 years. It reminds me of The Lion King. Actually, there's a scene where The Lion King is a story about a kid who kind of gets pushed down the wrong direction, and his father ends up getting murdered, and he gets manipulated into thinking that he did it, and so he goes away to quote paradise, and then there's this calling for him to kind of come back and take the throne back. And
Yes.
His father appears to him in the sky and he says, "Remember who you are." And I've always taken that to mean, remember who you are. You are not a coward. You are a courageous person. You are the blood of kings. You are someone who, sure, you could stay here and eat your juicy slugs and swim in the lake and all this, but that's not who you are. And so I like that. I think this reminding ourselves that we can be someone of virtue, and to stay by that amidst the chaos. And the thing I like about that too, that example you gave, is that the appropriate action there was to do what he did.
Right.
It wasn't to close his eyes, ignore what's going on around him, and sit in peace. It was to, no, I'm going to engage here in an appropriate way that isn't, "Hey guys, would you mind calming down?" Because he knows in that environment that that's not a wise thing to do. The appropriate action is to do what he did. And I think that's an important thing to highlight as well.
Yes. It's so interesting how the expression of morality is always situational, and yet it's also absolute. It kind of toggles between situational, absolute. By absolute, I mean just those principles that few sane people would ever dispute. We should be kind. We should be considerate. We should summon the better parts of ourselves. The things you know, whether people come to believe those things through religion or just kind of because we're hardwired to believe those things, still, in some situations, the most moral thing to do is to fire the gun or just scream at the guys around you who are, yeah,
Right.
you get that idea. Yeah.
Now, in the darkest of times on that journey, the speech being an example of that moment, there's a line there. I mean, every line of that speech we could take out and digest it, but there's a line that says, "How could the end be happy?" Right? And there's these
Yeah.
times where we really do, despite how well despite our efforts, I guess, there are times where we get that. Like, you call it like a loss of faith, or call it what you will. These periods where, like, Frodo's literally saying, "I can't do this," like, definitively.
Yeah. Yes.
And, you know, in that instance, Sam was the one that kind of came in and was able to work through that. I think there's a community and a togetherness aspect in there that you mentioned in the start of the episode of shared suffering, which I think makes suffering a little bit less like suffering. But how do we navigate those, like, those rock bottom moments where we do lose faith? And it's hard. It's when you're in that moment, it's easy for us to say now, okay, yeah, you just climb your way out of it. But when you really lose faith, it's like, it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Right. And then the next moment happens after it's gone. And in that moment, perhaps you remember that, wait a second, this isn't just about me. If I pivot toward the better part of myself, what does that do? Well, it's kind of like contributing to the insurance policy of civilization itself, because we are only as civilized as the trust that we actually have for and with each other. And that trust comes from individuals acting with integrity and honor and summoning the better part of ourselves. So, regardless of whether we're feeling crummy or desolate or what's the point or I'm done, what about your kids? What about your neighbors? What about people you don't even know, but who, by your smallest actions, by your smallest choices, will quietly but steadily radiate out into the future and to distant locales, and somehow upgrade someone else's moment, or somehow upgrade the commonweal, be a force for bringing people back together to work in common towards worthy ideals.
I think it's a theme in the Lord of the Rings that gets overlooked because, at the end, Frodo, he actually doesn't destroy the ring. And it's always, it puzzled me for years, but he can't even finish. I should say he can't even, like, like he's weak or something. Like, the guy was walking barefoot with this heavy ring for years, right? But, he couldn't even climb up the last, but anyways, he gets to the bottom of the mountain and the ring's getting heavier as he gets closer. And Sam has to physically carry him. And he says, "I can't carry the ring for you. I can't carry your burden, but I can carry you, and that can be my burden." And then even when they get to Mount Doom and he's about to throw the ring in the lava, he completely loses himself at that point and decides to put the ring on. And, through, you could say, providence, what happened between Sam and Gollum and Frodo, the ring ended up being destroyed. But I think, that part of, it's like you don't have to do everything alone. And in some sense, if you're carrying the biggest burden that you can, or even let's say you're carrying your burden, in some sense you shouldn't do it alone, but in some sense maybe you can't do it alone. And I think that's also an encouraging thought as well. What do you think of that?
Oh, definitely. And it's also get over yourself. I mean, we're not the center of everything, right? We can contribute. And the fact that we exist confers necessity and dignity on us. But we aren't gods. We're just here to do our part as best as we can. And that's good enough. It's more than good enough. And I think sometimes, I think so many people walk around, whether in a story like you're describing or just out in the world, we walk around on the one hand underestimating what we could do to help, and then overestimating how consequential we are. It's sort of like we've got our place in the theater of life a little out of kilter. And I think, this is why, just kind of circling back a little bit to Stoicism or Stoic adjacent ideas, the idea that actions, in a sense, are more important than words, I think is key, because when you are invested in doing an action for good, to uplift the moment, to lighten someone's load, you're not thinking about yourself. You're busy getting the good thing done. And that's a good thing. I'm not making the case for, oh, we've all just got to be egoless, just like kill the ego. It's not that. But so much of our fretting and feeling like we don't belong to the world is rooted in a kind of distorted sense of our of self-importance. And sadly, our culture now is so focused on the performative aspect of being a human being, and curating our lives for the purpose of display on social media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes we're not willing to just accept our own ordinariness. We always feel like we have to be surpassingly great, and then we always find ourselves wanting. Why do I feel crummy all the time? Because I wasn't perfect or better than everyone else or reaching for a higher bar. Relax, just do the next good thing.
Yeah, and I can say from a personal level, I find that when, these moments, let's say, where you lose a bit of faith or things get really rough, action is sometimes the only thing that can drag me out of it. And
Yes.
I remember during COVID, when COVID first happened and we were locked up, and I was in my apartment. My roommate was traveling, so she was gone. But so I was in this apartment by myself, and I'm introverted. But I had my weights in there, so I was still squatting and still exercising. And I just remember a strong reluctance after like a few weeks of kind of this isolation, just a strong reluctance to exercise. But then I also knew that if I didn't do that, it was going to be much, much worse. Like whatever you want, I don't want to label it as a depression. I guess it was just, dealing with the things that everybody dealt with at the time, right? And I can tell you, like, just the just the strength alone to lift yourself off the couch, put your shorts on, go grab some weights, and just to go through those motions, you know, sometimes that's enough. Like that's enough just to
It's
go through the
huge.
motions.
It's
Yeah.
huge. Yeah. I mean, in that case, how did you take that first step? How did you get those shorts on?
I think it was,
How?
I think a couple things. First of all, I think I had a little bit of faith that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. I knew, I knew for a fact, and this was probably the biggest thing. I knew for a fact that failure to do it would be disastrous, right? It's just, it's kind of like when someone in your family dies and you have to go to their funeral and you know it's going to be rough, but if you don't do that, you know it's going to be far worse.
Yeah.
And I guess that knowing just comes from experience, I suppose. Maybe a little bit of wisdom, I don't know, but it's hard nevertheless. And there's always that, like, yeah, just why not just stay here? And I'm sure Frodo had the same thought. Like, I can't do this. Why not just stay here?
Yeah.
Right. So how do we take that first step? And that's some people say that's the hardest one, and I suppose I could agree.
I think it does circle back to what we were saying earlier, the idea of remembering who you are, or if not who you are, remembering who you want to be, and just taking some eensy weensy, teeny weeny step towards that, putting
Mm-hmm.
on the shorts. You put on the shorts. Okay, well, I got my shorts on. I don't want to just run around in my shorts. There are my weights. Okay, maybe I'll lift one weight. Well, that wasn't so bad. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so on.
Yeah.
I
The
don't mean to oversimplify, but
No, but
yeah,
it's the smallest possible step you can take on that journey.
yes,
And for Frodo at this time, it was literally just standing up. Sam grabs
right.
him by the shoulders and like helps him stand up. And it's like, no, no, no. Like there's good in this world. Come up. And I think that's the final word in that, the final phrase in that speech. There's some good in this world and it's worth fighting for.
Yes, yes.
And that's important not
And
to lose
there's,
sight of.
right. And there's some good in ourselves that's worth fighting for, worth summoning. Because otherwise, then what are we acceding to? Just being useless bags of meat that reproduce and die? That's a sad story. I don't want that to be the story.
That'd be a terrible story.
You don't want to live in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Uh, so so they're in this moment and this story is like, these guys are doing the thing to do. They're carrying literally the heaviest burden that they could possibly carry on this. And I think one of the things that at least I've heard people struggle with is, as a culture, we're focused on big, big issues. And, we all have a part to play in those big issues. Like take climate change, take the wars going on right now. And I think in some sense people can get paralyzed because this problem is so big.
Yes.
And so how do we align ourselves with those big problems, or should we even align ourselves with those big problems, or should we just be present and focus on what's in front of us? How do we keep alignment? How do we kind of play our role appropriately despite like this just abyss? It's like staring into an abyss of a problem.
Right. Well, I think it's both and. I, I mean, we have to be citizens of the world. We have to be aware of what's going on, and we have to remember what matters. But what is in front of us right now? There's a woman who is struggling and needs to be helped to her car. Stop worrying about what's going on, say, in Venezuela for a second and take her, do you need some help, ma'am? I mean, that sounds like maybe simple-minded kind of Boy Scout stuff, but it really is, and I suppose I'm repeating myself or saying the same thing, but I do believe it's our local proximate actions executed with integrity that help to form the influence the spiritual ecology of the world. And I don't mean that in some woo-woo kind of way, but it's just if that woman who was needed help to her car is the recipient of your kindness, of your help, just of your help, because that's what needed to be done, then she in turn, within her own uh, frame of reference when considering humanity, however subconsciously, she sees the world as a place where you voted for her to see the world as an interdependent place where we take care of each other. And you're actually doing something you're capable of doing. And of course, at the same time, you can send money to Venezuela or to Ukraine or, whatever. You can do a lot of things. But I think so often people can easily, and especially because of the way news is being delivered to us incessantly, rat-a-tat-tat, 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 and kind of hysterically, we get over-focused on things over which we have no control, and then we're just kind of useless within this. I'm just saying over again what you said at the beginning of our talk, Brandon. There's so much over which we do have control. And, I just think it's valuable to grab those opportunities because they are in their own way far reaching.
Mm-hmm. Let me run.
I don't
Let
know.
me
What do
run.
you think about that?
Well, no, it's interesting, and I would agree. I would agree, of course. I have a. So recently, we had a snowstorm here, and I was driving on the highway, and there was someone who swerved off the road. The vehicle seemed to be in good condition, but what happens is the snow gets underneath the car, and it stops the wheels from being able to turn, and so they can't get
Yeah.
themselves out, and I'm going somewhere with this, but I pulled over and just thought, okay, like I'll see what I can do for this guy. And I have a truck, didn't have anything to pull him out, like no chain or anything to connect the vehicles. Didn't have a shovel. I had my window scraper and I tried to help with that. And it became pretty apparent at a certain point that we didn't have the tools for this, right? Like this guy's going to have to call a
Yeah.
tow truck. And the guy was saying, I'm late for my dialysis. And so that was,
Oh,
that was kind of a sad thing, right? And I said, well, I can drive you to the hospital if you want to leave your car here. And he said, no, I want to get my car. So we kind of kept digging, and at a certain point, he realized that it was kind of futile, and just judging, it's a judgment. Maybe I'm wrong. Judging by his car, and it didn't seem like he was particularly wealthy, so I kind of felt bad about him having to call a truck to come haul him out of the ditch. And so I kind of stayed with him until he made the call, and then I had to go to work. And I guess the point in that is there was much of that did not feel pleasant to me.
right.
I had to really share his burden emotionally.
Yes.
Because I'm here and I'm like this is like this isn't gonna work. This guy's gonna have to call a tow truck, and as he's making the call, I'm thinking the same thought he's probably having, which is, do I have enough money in my bank account to pay for this truck?
Yeah.
And then I'm leaving, and as I'm leaving, I'm still thinking like, God, like maybe there's something else I could have done. And do you think like there's a part of us that like it's almost like we're afraid to help because maybe we're not sure if we know the right answer, or maybe we just don't like it's a hard thing. Like you have to carry some of that burden, and maybe there's a fear of
Yes.
that.
All true. And also there is we in performing acts of kindness, acts of help, there has to be a kind of proportionality. I mean, we can't completely just surrender our own welfare to quote unquote be of service. And yet, I think a lot of times, even if we don't have the tools or we're not endowed with the knowledge in a given situation to completely solve it, and it even feels uncomfortable, and we'd even rather be doing something else. It's not like we have to finish the job. We show up, we give the best we can, and that's part of a concatenation, part of a chain of actions that land in a certain way, both at a practical level, but in the human heart, that add up to good. And by good, I simply mean not happy good, but meaningful good. Because meaningfulness is not comfortable. Meaningfulness is earned. It's an exertion. It's a going outside of oneself.
Yeah,
What a stinker.
it's great. There's a Peterson quote. He said, "Meaning is better than happiness, but it's almost unbearable." And that's just one of those Peterson quotes that just takes the life out of you. But you know,
My goodness, yeah.
but I think we all feel that, and it's worth knowing because it's not. We talk about like this stoic idea of flourishing and eudaimonia, and sometimes I feel like we overemphasize the pleasantness of it, and we don't remind people that no. Like a lot of times it's going to be tough. Like it's still going to be really tough. You're still going to have to go
Yes.
through things. You're still going to have to feel, a lot of things. Like when you're present with a family member who's sick, for example, like that's hard. That's really tough. And what I wanted to ask you is that, like, how much do you think sometimes, when we're in these low periods, your vehicle went off the road and you're late for your dialysis and you got no money in the bank, and like how much sometimes do we need to just be seen as a human being by others?
Oh gosh, yes. I can't say it better than that. Full stop. We need to be seen by others, even the introverts among us, even the misanthropes among us. We need to be seen. We are creatures who live in dialogue, who test for echo. Yeah,
Yeah.
we need to be seen.
Yeah, and I think it's a good message. You talked earlier about acts of kindness, and maybe that is one of the best acts of kindness is just to be willing to see people,
Yes.
where they are, see them, and yeah, and hopefully that's at least partially enough.
I think so. And I suppose a corollary of that is is to listen and to not try to improve the other person, to just see them, as you say.
Yeah, there's this guy.
Because
Sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, please, you.
No. I just want to throw you this quick quote. John Deloney, he's a psychologist. He said, "Your loved ones are not a problem to fix; they're someone to love."
Wow, you've got some good quotations in your quiver.
Yeah, I reference other people, other much wiser people than I am, but what a thing to say, and I think partially the role of love is to not fix them. It's not the right word, but it's to help them on their journey. It's to stand by them as they're going through it, I guess. But yeah, I don't know, like, what do you make of that? It's one of those interesting things. Like, how do we really help people, I guess, is the broadest way of asking that question. Like, you're in this situation, someone maybe you care about, and like Sam couldn't carry Frodo's burden. We can't carry other people's burden, even though sometimes we feel like we might want to. But like, how do we really help others?
How do we really help others? We listen, I think. This is my response is half-baked, not conclusive. I think we listen so that we can understand that other person's world on their terms, even if the way they represent their life or circumstances grates on our nerves, or we think to ourselves, well, the way I would take care of it is I would do A, B, and C, and P, Q, and R, and then it would all be handled, and just take some antidepressants for God's sakes, or whatever. Yeah, I I feel again that I'm just repeating or italicizing, bold-facing what you're saying is people need to be seen. They need to be heard. And then I think when they feel heard and they feel seen, then you can ask, how can I help? Or I have some ideas. Are you interested? If not, that's all right.
Yeah, that's a question I need to ask more. Because just, I think this is a common thing, but just as an engineer, I guess, whenever someone comes to me with a problem, it's like you go into fix mode.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
You just systematically, like, you type something into Chat GPT and you just get this this right. But I think, yeah, like, in some sense, people really do have to directly or indirectly ask for your help with something before I think you really can. And you can offer, but I think it's like, if you try and impose, say, I'm going to help you, it's like, that's just not going to work. It's the classic leading a horse to the water thing. And so you have to have, I guess maybe detachment is the right word. Like, you have to have this detachment, and that, like, you're on your own journey. If you need me, I'm here, but you're on your own journey. And then while you're traveling with them on that journey, like we mentioned earlier, you gotta carry some of their you gotta feel what they're feeling along the way as well. And that's what, I guess, community and togetherness is.
Yes. We, related to that, we can always ask ourselves, when a person isn't ready to or interested in receiving the help that we think would be useful, we can turn back on ourselves and see, well, how can I improve myself
Mm-hmm.
right now? What am I not looking at in myself?
Yeah.
I was so busted on that the other day. My brothers and I are um, getting our getting our affairs in order. Our wills and stuff. And so one of my brothers called and said, well, hey, I went to a lawyer and I got my will and my power of attorney for this and blah, 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 blah. And I immediately, in my head, I wanted to be the wise big sister. And I wanted to say, well, and, did you make sure to make a list of all your accounts and the location of them? And then I realized, I haven't even done what he's done. Just, I think I got to go do.
Yeah. Right.
I simply said, good job.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see that. I see that. I see that in my industry sometimes, where you'll have someone with a lot more experience, tell you how to do something, and then you look at a project that they're managing, and it's like they haven't done any of the things that they told you.
People have plenty of barroom wisdom. They do.
Yeah. But isn't that interesting that we can often know, like the philosophy is there, but then the action is not. And that you made the point about words versus
Boom.
actions, right?
Boom. Yeah.
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 Man. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to navigate that. Because I mean, there's the knowing part of it. Read a Stoic
Right.
book. and then there's like the action, I should say acting. I guess you are acting at first, and then maybe it becomes who you are, but then there's the action component of it. How do you it's a curious question. How do you separate like intention? So you have words, you
Yes.
have intention, and then you
Yes.
have action.
Right.
So like how do you navigate that? Because to me, there's always seems to be like an intention in some senses. It's like what your soul is aiming at per se, but even if you can't articulate it, but like
Yes.
how do you think of those three words?
Okay. So we have intention, action, and then what was the third?
Like words, like what we say.
Words.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, um, this is, I suppose this is a personal article of faith for me. I think it's ideal to have the three of those, our actions, our words, and our intentions, be perfectly congruent. Um, However, we are but human beings. And because of that, I think we can't stand around waiting for those things to uh, be congruent. And so because of that, again, I am a huge fan of action, of doing what we know versus what we feel is the right thing, and forming the habit of the doing, which I believe in the fullness of time pulls our intention and our words into congruency. And I'm not trying to demote the value of words or intention, but say with intention, the Southern expression, mean to, don't pick no cotton, you know,
Mm.
or words. Words are wonderful. They are a way we understand the world, understand ourselves, and they're a way that we can transmit valuable ideas to other people, but they don't do anything in and of themselves. They really are just inert. Well, I don't know. There's all this debate now these days. Are words violence? Well, we don't want to go there. But ultimately, it's what you do, or it's what you refrain from doing, because that's a kind of action in itself. And indeed, in our quietest contemplations, when we're trying to be honest with ourselves and engage in honest self-reflection, yes, we want to check those intentions by all means. And yes, we want to read and write those words because they remind us what we want to point towards. But ultimately, you got to do the good stuff and refrain from doing the bad stuff. And it doesn't always feel comfortable or fun. It can, but we can't do it in service of those kind of false goals.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you got to be careful as well with your words, because once you start, saying false words, or once you start in a sense lying, you can really start to, really consider if you have any integrity at all, and then you start to lose trust for yourself, I think. And because I think I was just, as you were describing that, I was thinking of the situation of someone getting married, and how there's that element of speaking the words in front of people that is really intense, and also in some sense, maybe long term, maybe short term, we can debate that, but in some sense it kind of obligates you to what you were saying. But that's only true if you have integrity in your words, I guess, right?
Right. And if those words compel you to right action,
Right.
especially when things get hard or chaotic or different than you expected or hoped for.
So we're getting close to the end here, and we've spoken mostly about how to deal with the harshest of times. And I'm very happy for you, because I know you're going through some good things right now, and that's positive. But
Thank you.
one of the things we don't often think about is, because we don't need to, because things are going good, but what do we do when things are going well? What should we do? What should we think about? How should we act?
I think again, it's almost the same answer as when things are hard. We settle our minds so we can see and appreciate our embarrassment of riches. I mean, I know people who, have so much more materially or in terms of their public stature than I do, and they're miserable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm so great, but it's the fact that we've been given this gratuitous gift of life itself. When you step back from that, that is extraordinary, and it's kind of amazing to me that people aren't running around saying, "Whoa, you're not going to believe this, but I'm alive. I mean, I got to be alive. Yeah, I'm feeling a little gout in my ankle, but I'm alive."
Yeah.
It's amazing. Life is absolutely amazing if we pay attention, I think. What do you think?
I agree. I'm thinking of I often think about this idea as like a wave. So you got your troughs and you got your peaks in life in terms of pleasantness and unpleasantness. And I think it's almost like we got to bring ourselves back to center. And that doesn't mean when you're in the good times that you stop yourself from feeling joy. And I think this is one of the things that gets misunderstood about Stoicism. Say, well, just get rid of emotions. Like, no. Seneca has that quote, I would never see joy robbed from your house. And I love that. And even though joy is not the goal per se, the idea is that, well, if we act appropriately, yeah, you're going to probably increase your chances of getting some joy in there. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. And so I like that, because I think when things are going really well, we do get this rush, and like in the bad times, we think this too shall pass to get us through that.
Yes.
And I think we got to remind ourselves at the top, this too shall pass. It's not always going to be like this. And gratitude, like you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, that's real. Gratitude is real.
Yeah.
It's not just, something you do on an app.
Yeah, that's right. And I heard someone say that gratitude is the opposite of resentment. And I thought, yes.
I've never heard that before. Thank you. Yes.
I'll have to find out who to credit them, but I definitely remember reading that, and I thought, yeah, and I've never connected those ideas before, but yeah, a lot of truth there.
That's the golden nugget to me of this whole conversation. Thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Very important.
Thank you for being here. It's really wonderful to talk about this stuff with you. And like I said, any chance I get to talk about Tolkien's work and nerd out is a good opportunity. But I'm happy you're doing so well. And again, thanks for taking the time. And if you have anything else you're working on or any final words, I'll give you an opportunity to just give your last few words here.
Well, I'm excited to say that my book, The Art of Living, continues to be translated into many different languages. I just got the Korean edition, and I just got the German edition, and I just got the Arabic edition. I mean, these are all just happened within the last month. I just got, this is the Portuguese edition in Brazil. And what makes me happy about that is less like, oh, great, everyone's reading my book. That's not it. I have always felt that the purpose of that book was not even to celebrate Epictetus's ideas as much as to, in its small way, make virtue or the pursuit of goodness cool again, because it's kind of gone out of style. And I can only repeat, I think, what I said earlier, that if more people think virtue is cool, I think our civilization has a better chance of living harmoniously. And we all wish for that.
Well, I'm very happy to hear about the success of your book. And again, I think I certainly read it, and it's a beautiful, great little book. And what I mentioned to you the last time we spoke, but I found it brought Epictetus's idea using modern terminology. Like I remember you were using words like bitterness and resentment in there to talk about some of these ideas, and it really connected it for me, because reading the ancient texts, they're amazing, they're great, but we got to bridge that gap sometimes, and we don't always use translated words properly. And so it takes someone like yourself with a really deep understanding of this philosophy to translate it. So so thank you for that, and I'm very happy that your book is being translated. That's just beautiful. Awesome.
Thank you, Brandon. It's always great to talk to you and
to
hear you speak. I learned so much from you.
It's my absolute pleasure. So until next time.
Okay, my friend. Bye for now.
If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe with the notifications turned on. The Strong Stoic Podcast is also available in audio wherever you listen to your podcasts. Finally, you can join Substack to gain access to transcripts, articles, and premium podcast episodes.